Hi, my name is Ian Holder and I am going to be a junior this year. My hobbies include spearfishing on the weekends, spending time with my friends and family, playing water polo, and swimming. My favorite foods include cheeseburgers, chili cheese fries, pizza, and chicken Caesar salads. This year I'm looking forward to biology because the subject has always intrigued me and I'm looking forward to spreading my horizon of learning to its limits. The problem in my experiment is to figure out from my hypothesis if regular pinto beans grow better if they are exposed to sunlight versus having no exposure to sunlight throughout the experiment. The variables in my experiment included the independent variable of time, the dependent variable of growth rate from the pinto beans, and the constants of sunlight, water, and the type of beans. In this experiment, the control group is the group with exposure to sunlight because that is how the beans usually grow versus the experimental group of the beans growing with no exposure to sunlight. This is the graph for my seeds and light growth. As you can tell, I did 2 containers, each containing 10 seeds, and I did it for a 5-day period. Every day I would record the time that I recorded the seeds growth, and then I would measure the seeds by centimeter. For example, this seed right here, it says 2.6/2.0. The growth of the actual bean is 2.6 centimeters, but the extension of the sprout that was coming out of it would have been 2.0 centimeters. To get the total growth in my charts, I would have added them up to get a total of 4.6 centimeters. As you can tell, the smallest beans of the day are highlighted in orange, and the largest beans of the day are highlighted. This is my seeds without light growth data chart. Similar to the one with the seeds with light growth, I did 2 containers containing 10 beans each over a 5-day period. Likewise to the other data chart, I highlighted the largest beans of the day in yellow, and also the smallest beans of the day in orange. Also, I recorded the time each day that I measured the beans just to make sure that I approximately measured them around the same time each day to give them a fair, solid day of growing. In all, I did 4 graphs to represent the data I collected over the 5-day period from the beans' growth. This is the key I used for all 4 of those graphs. The orange represents the beans exposed to the sunlight. The purple represents the beans exposed to no sunlight. The number above the bar represents the exact length in centimeters, and if there is a slash going through the bar, that means there is more than one bean that is that long. This was my first graph. This is the smallest bean measurement from the both no sun and the sun containers. What I did was from each one of the 5 days, I got the smallest bean from each container and I plotted it on the bar graph right next to the opposing thing, like the sun versus the no sun. And as you can see, for almost all of the 5 days, the beans with no sun are bigger than the beans with the sun, even down to the smallest bean in the container, which just goes to show how much more better the beans with no sun grew than the beans with the sun. This is my second graph. This is the largest bean measurement from both the no sun and sun containers, just like the smallest bean measurement. For all 5 days, you could see that the beans with no exposure to sun morph the beans with exposure to sun. Especially coming to day 4, where the length of the bean with no exposure to sun is almost 4 times larger than the biggest bean with exposure to sun. And likewise on day 5, the largest bean with no exposure to sun is about 3 times larger than the largest bean with exposure to sun. This is my third graph. This is the difference between the largest and smallest bean from both containers. You can get the quantity above the bars by subtracting the largest bean, shown on graph 2, by the smallest bean, shown on graph 1. As you can see, Still, the beans with no sunlight dominate the length of the beans with sunlight. This is my fourth and final graph. This is the average length of beans from both no sun and sun containers. What I did was I added up the length of all beans for each 5 days respectively in their own day and divided it by 20 because there's 20 beans to get the quantity above the bars. Once again, as you can see, the beans not exposed to sunlight are much more dominant in growth than the beans exposed to sunlight. To conclude this experiment, my hypothesis was incorrect due to me predicting the beans with sun exposure would grow more and better than the beans with no sun exposure. The beans with no sun exposure clearly grew much more quickly and more large than the beans with the sun exposure. The beans in this experiment both grew for the same amount of time and received the same amount of water, which was twice a day around morning and nighttime. Overall, the beans not exposed to sun grew much more better than the beans that had sunlight exposure, which was contrary to my initial hypothesis before the experiment. For next time, one improvement I would make would have to be putting the sunlight seeds in more direct sunlight instead of putting them inside the house in the seal of a window so they are exposed to sunlight but limited to the sun when it does not shine directly in the position needed to shine sun on the beans. I would put the seeds outside on a table so the sun would be shining on them from sunrise to sundown. Thank you for listening, and I am looking forward to a great biology school year.